Hello. Hello,
Hi.
everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Welcome to Cross Continental Conversations, a segment of Building Radio where we bring in minds from across the OneBeat world to think and share together. Radio is a special is a space built on love, a space where we are glad to share with you all. My name is TshepangMabizela, and thank you all for being here. So, the first thing we're going to do, right? Please introduce yourself, right? Your name, where you're from, and please define your artistic practice in one word, just one word.
Shall I go first?
Sure.
Anyone can start.
Okay. Um, Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Ditty from India, and one word for my artistic practice is perhaps embodiment.
Hmm.
Cool. Hi, I'm
Amazing.
Owen. I'm Owen from the Philippines. And one word that I could describe my artistic process or my creative process is collaborative.
Hi, my name is Hana. I'm from Tunisia, and in one word, my artistic practice is it's passion.
Hi, I'm UMLILO from South Africa,
Mm.
and I would describe my practice as intergalactic.
Wow.
Wow. Intergalactic. Okay, cool. So, I'd like to remind everyone that this is a cool space. It's not some type of interview. We're just trying to get to know each other with relation to radio and see, what we have in common and what differences we also have. So I have like a really cool question about radio, and I'd like to know what is your dearest radio memory? And by this I mean like a positive association that you think and feel when you listen to radio. Would anyone want to talk about that?
Wow.
Shall I start?
Yeah, you can start,
So,
Hannah.
um, what just came to my mind is the summer days that I
Mm-hmm.
spent with my family. Um, like at 7 a.m. and maybe sometimes earlier, I can hear my
Mm-hmm.
mom turning on the radio and I can listen to some music, Tunisian folklore music in the morning. So my mom starts her day by opening the radio, then she starts the chores of the house. So when I start listening to that, I start waking up and start my day, my summer day. Although I wake up very late, but I spend like 2 hours or 3 hours listening to radio while I'm sleeping.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Anyone else?
I immediately thought of they used to have these radio plays in South Africa. When I was growing up, a lot of the radio stations, well, they still pretty much are, but they were separated by language, and a lot of them would have a slot either in the morning or in the afternoon where they would have these radio plays. Oh, sorry, my
Uh,
mic.
Umalilo,
Um,
we can't hear you well.
okay, is it better now?
A bit better.
A little bit. Okay, I've cranked it up all the way. Is
Maybe you can move a bit closer to the mic.
Yeah, let me just do this. Is this better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Um,
Perfect.
cool. I was talking about when I was a kid, growing up in the township, our radio stations were separated by language, but there used to be these radio plays that used to come on in different languages. And I have these fond memories of like, it would start at my house. So my grand would be listening to these radio plays, and it was like these kind of soapy like stories on radio. And then you'd go to another house, and then like the neighbor's house, everybody would listen to these stories around the same time. So it's just kind of like a really fond memory of like being able to like go visit your neighbors, or when you visit your friends, you'd have the same kind of thing happening in each house, and everybody would sit around and listen to these radio plays, which I thought was so fascinating.
Okay. Um, anyone else want to go?
I will go. Um, I have this experience here in the Philippines. Whenever it's Sunday, there's a radio station who will play 70s or 80s music, American music to be exact. And these are for grandparents and parents who are old enough to listen to these kinds of music. Um, it is a positive memory for me, or a, a great memory for me, because I associate this station with my memories with my grandparents and my parents.
Sweet. Um, for me, I have this memory from when I was really young. And the thing is, my family is not so musical. And I guess my introduction to the radio was when one of my cousins came to live with us in the city, because he was doing his schooling here. No, he was in university, and he had just come here. He was like 8 years older to me or something, so I might have been 10. And then he brought with him a little radio, and he would play it in the night time when he would be studying, and there would be there would be music on. and and I was like, okay, cool, like music. And it was really my introduction to music through his little radio. And I also felt like, cool, I could study when I'm listening to music, like do math or something like this. So yeah, it was cool.
That's cool. It's so amazing that like for a lot of you, it's like radio is very nostalgic, and it's got like old memories. It reverts to like an old time, and these old times, are reverting to family. They're reverting to our first love in music. Um, and I want to ask, like, is do you think to a degree, and this it doesn't have to be the case, but has radio, like looking at your youth, has it influenced your artistry, your music, your songwriting, any aspect of your artistry? Do you think that's the case? Or yeah, I'd like to know that. Like, has radio influenced you in any way as far as your music is concerned and your artistry?
Actually, yes, it did. As Ditty said, actually, she reminded me of very special memories. I used to listen to the radio while doing math in high school. Yeah, so I chose certain radio where they have like very old Arabic music, um, very quality music. So I used to listen to them, and they brought like music that I did not really know before. So my taste started to develop slowly, and I started to listen to new type of songs and artists. So I discovered a totally new world with the radio while doing my math. And slowly this affected my way of playing. Although I'm Tunisian, I was influenced by Egyptian music due to listening to the radio. So till now, everyone listens to me. They tell me, although you are modernizing your ways of playing on Qanun, still the Egyptian touch is still in there. It's still in your soul, and like I cannot feel it. I cannot hear it while playing, but other people always tell me that. So yeah, basically that's the memory.
For me, it's a bit hard to say. Um, I am singing, I'm part of the independent music scene in India, and I'm actually writing in English. And I'm singing, yeah, my music is more inspired by the music in the West. And yeah, I think that the radio here is it's a bit difficult here actually, because we don't have any radio stations that play English music. And I remember I grew up listening to a lot of English music. It used to be there, and that's how I was. So yeah, that's right. I did get influenced by that music. And I remember I remember my favorite song was actually the radio song. There used to be a song on the radio, the advertisement for one of the stations, which was
Uh-huh.
called All India Radio. Um, and that was the first radio channel ever in India. And it was an it was an indie musician who sang that song on the radio. And for me, that was really cool and really inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we don't have any stations which are actually playing English music, which is a bit of a pity. There's one station that
What,
sometimes plays. Yeah.
why do you think it's a pity?
Um. Well, I think there should be a balance of everything. I wish there
Yeah.
was more of that as well. And a lot of the music that's played is actually just from film. It's film music, so it's Bollywood. And unfortunately, um, a lot of Bollywood music these days is, yeah, it's very, I don't know how to describe it. I have a lot of aversion towards a lot of this stuff. So
Mhm.
I guess you will not hear very nice things from me about it. The old Bollywood music that I grew up on was beautiful, really, in the 60s, 70s. It was gorgeous. But somehow now it's a bit of a mishmash, and actually a lot of Bollywood songs also they are sexualized, and they are in a really strange way, in the way that like gender, it's very strange. Okay, I'm getting into this now. So
Yeah, get into
essentially,
it.
I'm getting into it. The female body is totally sexualized, and most of this music is kind of based off of that. And somehow
Mhm.
um yeah, like the lyrics of the songs are so they are very derogatory sometimes. This is not music that maybe children can listen to. It's not music that's empowering for women to hear, for anyone to hear. And a lot of it is just I don't know, it's just not tasteful. I don't find it tasteful. And a lot of the radio is playing this kind of music these days because this is what everyone's listening to. There's not enough folk, there's not enough classical, there's not enough there's no radio stations playing world music or music that's written in any other languages. Or so it's a bit of a weird situation that we're in. Yeah.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is. It is very heavy,
Yeah.
but
Sorry, guys.
very
It's fine because
no. Mm.
here in my
Yeah.
country it's
Yeah.
it's the total opposite. Like
Mm.
everything is being played in the radio, so there's so much diversity that you can hear. And I think that kind of influenced me in my creative process or in my artistry, because I get to listen to different kinds of music and really dwell or delve into it and appreciate every kind that it is being offered in the radio. And I think it is um crucial for everyone to have that kind of um radio environment, so to say, because as Ditty says, it um there should be a station or someone who would play, or yeah, who would play music, who play music that empowers women, that empowers the LGBT community. And it's, I think it's very crucial. It's part of, it's it's like the epitome of one community. You could see how people are in a community through their radio. That's great. That's cool. Like, amazing. Just realize that now. Thank you, DT.
Thank you, Owen.
UMLILO, we are talking about influence in like the radio stations that we used to listen to, and how much influence it's given us, if it has given us any type of influence, and the artist that you've become. How much of a role has radio played in that? And also you can touch into the things that Ditty spoke about. If you have something to say about South African radio and how it's it's not all encompassing, how like what can you say about this?
I think South African radio, for me growing up, it was so different from what it is now. But I will say that I only started noticing when I was a teenager. It felt like when I was a kid, there was a lot of diversity on radio, but it was still much of like an apartheid system in South Africa. So everything was still like, this language and this tribal group has their own radio station, and this is the music that they should play because this is the language that they speak. So in a way, interestingly enough, growing up, there were a lot more options when you like turn the radio and like you'd hear all these different types of music. A lot of traditional music was also being played on a lot of radio stations. Whereas I think now it's kind of like a different story. Like South Africa's trying to aim for a more kind of localized radio, kind of listenership. So in the past, we'd find that like there was a point actually where like 80% of the music that you'd hear on South African radio was international music, like from the US or from the UK. So in a way, I kind of grew up in all of these phases where there was this beginning phase where there was a lot of kind of diversity, but it's still under this weird, murky apartheid system. And then kind of the new South African system that embraced this American culture. So when I was growing up, when I was like 10, 12, most of the songs we'd listen to on the radio were kind of hip hop songs and like songs from R&B and pop and songs from, the US a lot of the time. And ever since then, there's been this movement by South African artists to kind of have more local music on our radio, because I only notice when I go to other countries, like, oh wow, they have all of this type of music on radio, whereas in South Africa, you listen to the top 40 hits that you would find anywhere else, in the world. So I think now radio has kind of started being more aware of itself, of like the kind of discrimination against local music, because even though we would hear a lot of local songs, you'd only hear the popular songs. And this is true to this day. Of like a new artist who's relatively unknown or who's underground, it's very difficult to get onto radio, which made a lot of, like, for me, even though I don't really consider myself an artist that's on the underground, I am an artist that, like, it's difficult for my songs to be on radio because of, my sexuality, my gender, or the things that I speak of in my music. So South Africa doesn't really have a lot of kind of political music on radio unless it's like songs from the 60s or the 70s. So I think it's a very interesting topic in relation to, South Africa, because we're in such a unique position, but we're also at a point where radio is still one of the most main consumer, like people consume a lot of radio, and that's how they get a lot of new music in South Africa. So it's still lacking in the diversity in kind of like my opinion. So it's always interesting to hear about other countries that are kind of, diversifying, and you can hear all types of music from traditional to more urban sounds. Whereas with us, it's kind of like, there'll be one show that's dedicated to this specific genre of like, and there'll be like underground music, and then you'll have like, this one show that plays like underground music. So I think there's a lot that still needs to be done. But growing up, it was really interesting. I think like a lot of it influenced my ear, because I kind of had these influences from all over the world growing up. But I feel like any person who's growing up now would not have the same experience as I had.
Wow, that is a lot of truth, especially because I'm South African, and
You know
but
how it's like.
and this is, what you're saying is so amazing. It actually goes to my next question, where I wanted to ask, like, is it important for everyone here that their music is played on their radio stations, community radio stations or the bigger radio stations in your countries? Like, how important is it to you as an artist that your music is heard in the radio stations in your countries?
For me, actually, it depends on the project I'm working on. For instance, currently, what I'm working on, I don't really care about that, because it's targeted to very few people, especially artists. So when it's on the radio, it's going to a larger niche. So I'm not looking for that. But for instance, if I'm working on a project that I am targeting mass audience and I'm targeting everyone, that's where I'll be looking forward to have my music on the radio. So it's like, for me, I look at it as a marketing strategy more than any other view. Yeah, but in general, I'm not a huge fan of media, and I would love to share my music lively in front of people instead of just streaming it on a radio or a TV.
Cool. And Hannah, I'd like to ask, as far as like access is concerned, like in your country, is it easy to go on these radio stations? I know you're saying you're not big on radio, but like if you were, you wanted like your whole country to listen to your music, like how difficult is it, or how easy is it for you to get your music on the stations?
Actually, here it all depends on who you know. If you know, if you have a huge network, then you can have your music everywhere. But if you don't know anyone, you can't have it nowhere. So that's how things go in here, sadly.
It's actually very similar over here as
I
well.
think it's all over Africa.
I once got this PR document. I was releasing an album. I was releasing a single, and in South Africa, there's kind of the scandal that everybody kind of knows about. Like, people have been bribed to play music, so that's kind of the system that kind of works. So if you want to guarantee your music being on radio, you have to have money and you have to know the right people, and everything works with bribes. Like, to a point where there were kind of these allegations of like our award system kind of works in a similar kind of way of like, depending on how much money you pump towards, these local awards, you will get a nomination guaranteed, and like 20K will get you this much. So it's really interesting because you hear about, in America, for example, that's what's been happening also, like since the 40s, 50s. People would come to the radio station with like a briefcase of money and be like, please play the song on rotation. And that system still works. So I kind of agree with you in that sense of like, I don't really want my songs to be on radio if it's not on a kind of equalized system. But at the same time, I can see the benefits that it does for the artists that do pump in and kind of follow the system of like, let me bribe and try and get in, because it basically fast tracks your music into a larger audience in a very short space of time. So what would have taken you, maybe a year to promote,
can take you literally 3 days, and all of a sudden your song is like popular and you're getting the benefits of, you know, having this larger audience. So it's kind of like, it's a bit of a two-edged sword in a way, because every artist wants that success and that the resources to be able to do that, but the system itself is a bit awkward.
Yeah. So UMLILO is talking about something we call payola. It's called payola in South Africa. And I'd also like to hear Ditty. How is it like? Do you care that your music gets airplay in India? Is that a big deal for you? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a big deal for me. I was very excited when my songs went to radio. And this was 2014, I think, the first time. But I have to say, ever since, things have really changed. There used to be one radio station that used to play independent music, and they combined, like UMLILO was saying, independent music, alternative music into these 2-3 shows. That was it. And now we don't have that anymore. So unfortunately, for my last 2 records, there was no radio, and I felt a bit sad, because I have to say that actually it was much easier for my music to play on German radio, Austrian radio, British radio than it was in India. And I just feel, why should it be like that? That's so stupid. And there is just no space for independent music at the moment on the radio, and that, I think that hurts a bit, because it's like, what is the country really listening to? And what are we all listening to? And yeah, all this stuff. It's like now, I like, for example, I have this nephew, and he knows the lyrics to this rapper's songs, and the lyrics are so trashy, and they are just talking about, yeah, even rape and some other stuff, but not in a good way. And it's just like, oh, the kids are really listening to this stuff, and they're growing up. So I feel quite concerned about all this. At the same time, I have to say, there are like a few things sprouting up here and there. Like, there's some independent radios coming up, but they're all internet radios. They don't have frequencies. So you have to tune in through your internet and listen, which is also quite lovely. Yeah.
And the question of access, is it easy for you to get your, or was it, or so it's is it difficult? So it's just generally difficult to get your music on the radio
There's,
stations that exist now. The
yeah, there's
ones.
just no space for independent music. They only play Bollywood, or even old Bollywood. That's nice. Some stations are playing old Bollywood stuff. Some stations are doing some other interesting work, like the main radio station called AIR. They even do things about mental health. They do things about health. Like, they generally host a lot of talk shows where people can call in and discuss their problems. And so there's a lot of this other kind of stuff going on. But in terms of like the music that they are playing, it's a bit, yeah, there's just no space for people like me to play their music. Yeah.
Okay. Owen, do you want to tell us about access and
Sure. I
yeah.
think radio is, my song being on a radio would be a big deal also. I resonate with DT's um statements. But it is kind of opposite of what DT said in terms of having a space for independent music, because as I have observed here in the Philippines, there is a time where independent music is sort of, or has become the popular music here in the Philippines, and has had a lot of space and slots um for their songs to be played in the radio. But unlike what Unlilo said, I'm being against everyone here right now. But unlike Unlilo said, that the purpose of, like, I don't know if I got it right, but with the purpose of your music going to the radio to become popular in just 3 days, I think it is the opposite here. It is the popular music is always be played in the radio. So there is a little chance for your music to be played in the radio if it's not popular. So if even if you're an independent musician, when it is not popular in the nation, it will not be sort of played in the radio. And I agree with what Hannah said, that if you do not have that connections, it is really hard to get your music be played on the radio. But there is a radio station here in the Philippines where they play classical music, and they are sort of independent in a sense. uh, and I love what they do because they feature young artists who aren't as established as they should be in the radio, like how people think. I like what they do because they feature local classical musicians, not only classical musicians from the West, but also the classical musicians who are thriving and um, doing their best to pursue this kind of music. So yeah.
I have a
Cool.
question.
Yeah.
I wonder if in your countries artists get paid to be on the radio. Does streaming on the radio generate income? Because here it doesn't.
It
Very
doesn't.
famous artists only.
I mean, they should, but it's all about who's your who has your publishing, and that also can be a scandal because essentially they're supposed to follow up on how many times your songs have been played.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the scandals we have in South Africa, is that a lot of artists haven't been getting their royalties because the kind of tracking and the publishing companies that are supposed to do that have been in shambles. So it's kind of like no one knows where their royalties are.
It's in the cloud.
Wow.
I think I could say maybe, but not that I know of. I'm not aware. And I don't know if it's a good thing or not.
Yeah.
And Ditty, do you know why you don't, like, artists don't get paid for radio play in India?
Yeah, because they are saying, so there are a few radio stations who said, okay, yeah, we'd like to play your music in these small independent shows. And then they said they are not going to pay because this is an opportunity this is a platform for me. And it's not doing anything for them, but it's doing everything for me.
The exposure card.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how it goes.
Listen, we're not gonna pay you because we're giving you exposure.
Yeah.
Exposure.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Ah.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. Exposure is a thing in South Africa. It's like it's a
Is
big
it?
deal. A lot of artists get paid with exposure. So I think
Yeah, it's a thing in India too, for sure.
okay. Okay, so now
I must add something.
alright.
I must add something to this. Our PRO is perhaps the worst in the world. I'm saying this on radio. Oh well. Yeah, the PRO in India, right? During COVID, they came up with this thing, and I might be getting this a bit wrong, but it's not too far away from what it was. it was something like, if you wanted to do a concert, you will not get royalties from them, but you would have to pay 200 200 euros, like 20,000 rupees.
What?
To them to make a concert.
What?
Yeah, and they have been quite disorganized and stuff in their thing, and for a long time artists couldn't really register with them for all reasons, and a lot of Indian artists actually registered outside with PROs in the West or in Australia, because our PRO is clearly not doing the job. Yeah.
I didn't mean to laugh as much as I did. I didn't want to.
Oh my gosh.
This is cool because, all these conversations we are having, this was initially supposed to be my last question, but I'm going to have to bring it up because this is something I think could tie back into this, where in radio, right, we talk about, in the elective, we were talking about the natural progression of radio and its evolution and what that could look like. And we were talking a lot about Spotify and Apple Music and how, they could possibly be the new evolution of radio because, they offer conversations through podcasts and they offer music through, playlisting and actual, uploading of music. Do you agree? And do you think it's a better option if, the evolution of radio is these platforms? What does that mean for you and your music?
I would say that, for me personally, I think the democratization of radio and music is a good thing. So the more people that have access to music, the more people that have access to the information that they need through podcasts, that's wonderful because, I've lived in an era where that wasn't possible. And it's so nice, especially for me, I don't really listen to a lot of frequency radio. I don't have a car. I don't even at home. I either listen to a podcast or I'm listening to a playlist. So for somebody who just wants to be able to curate their own, consumption of music and, talk radio and that kind of stuff, I think it's excellent, because I also don't like the idea of, especially in the South African context where a lot of our radio stations are still owned by one state-owned company, and that used to be a mouthpiece 30 years ago, and you don't know if they still are, but there's always that risk of this one voice kind of going and filtering everything. Whereas with internet and, with other companies coming in and being we also offer podcasts and all of that, they've basically kind of leveled the playing field a little bit. And we're seeing how internet radio has also become so much more popular. Well, not more popular, but it's gaining momentum in terms of people accessing that. So I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I kind of agree with UMLILO with how people could curate their own kind of, or their own playlist and send them to anyone or to themselves for their own consumption. But however, I find Spotify and Apple Music, I don't think it is. Yes, it is accessible for those who could pay for subscription, but for those who cannot, I think it isn't. So it really depends on where you are and how you see radio, because radio with frequencies are free in a sense that you could just tune in to that frequency. Unlike Spotify and Apple Music, you have to pay in order to stream music. And I think that's just the downside of that. Being it accessible, quote unquote, for people who does have the privilege to pay. And I think it is a struggle with a lot of people, and I think for developing countries to access these platforms because of those subscriptions that is being um, implemented. And I think music is somehow like what radio is doing is meant to be consumed in that kind of way. And I'm not so sure if it's a good thing or not. The evolution of radio speaking into like Spotify and Apple Music. I don't know if it is a good thing or not. It is imperfect for sure, but I'm really conflicted if it's good or not. Um yeah, there is this uh, our band here in the Philippines, Muni Muni, has a Discord server, and there's a channel for like music listening wherein people could listen to music all at the same time in the channel. So it's like a radio of some sort. Um, there's just these bots who are being the medium of that stream. So they're not really streaming from Spotify, but they are streaming from Spotify, but not Spotify. Do you know what I mean? It's like a third party app or bot who streams the music from another platform and plays it into your channel. So it kind of breaks the subscription conflict that I have, and somehow it makes a community of some sort inside our community. And I think with that, it's beautiful. It's because it's communal. It introduces interaction with people, and yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it does somehow. I hope it does.
It does. It does. It really does. Um, I think accessibility is a big thing, and you're right. Like music really should be accessible, and the moment it isn't, it poses like a really a big deal. And you're right. Um, and like maybe for like South Africa, it's a bit difficult because it's harder to get your music on radio. So even for artists, the music is still not like it's not accessible because it will never get there. But I also understand like Spotify also poses like an accessibility thing because people have to pay for it. And you're right, subscriptions are a big deal. It's like a those who have money have it and those who don't. And the recurring aspect of it, like having to pay every month to for your radio to literally exist also poses a bit of a threat. So I understand. And Hannah and Ditty, what are your um opinions?
For me, I'd like to speak about my personal perspective. Here, the radios in Tunisia, after the evolution, they changed their programs to 90% talking about politics and the problems in the country, etc. So, at every time I open the radio and I start listening, actually, I feel so stressed. All the problems, all the conflicts in the country, they keep talking and talking in details about the same conflicts and topics. So this led me to stop listening to the radio now, maybe for 10 years. So it's a very long time. I stopped. I only tune to only music radios, not the other radios that stream everything together. So here I believe that Spotify is became my best option, and I have the free version. Actually, Owen was talking about the subscription. I have the free version, so I can listen to everything basically. So and in addition to that, I listen to podcasts. So I stopped listening to radios only maybe with my mother, or very few times I do listen to radio because of this. And most of um, most of people in my age now in Tunisia, they have the same perspective, because when you listen to the radio, you can get only negative vibes. They keep talking that the country is going in a very bad path. The conditions are very bad. Etc. This is the whole day what people are talking in radio. So we stopped listening to them. Basically, only in a taxi you can listen to radio. Yeah.
I think I'd like to respond to what Hana said. It's so wonderful, in my opinion, because of where I come from, that you can say that people in your country are talking about what direction the country is going in.
Absolutely, but
Yeah.
this is too much. They only
Yeah, I can imagine. I can totally
how
understand.
positive vibes are.
Yeah. Like when I hear that, I'm just like, wow, because here people who will speak up will be silenced, and it's really a difficult time for our country, and with this government especially. And I think that that's what is missing, I guess, if radio transitions into becoming Spotify, Apple Music, then there's no space for conversation, which we're already missing on the radio anyway now. But I guess radio is a reflection of the society that we live in, and I guess that localization is also really important. Like, to really reflect a society, one has to reflect the culture, the indigenous culture, the various traditions, yeah, a lot of those things, I guess, also kind of get lost when we kind of rely on these globalized ways of consuming anything, whether it's Amazon, whether it's, Apple Music, Spotify, whatever. And so, yeah, I guess there are some great things about it, but I really agree with Owen. It's not easy for people to subscribe, and even to have a free subscription, I guess people would need internet, and some people can't afford internet in this country. And so, yeah, there are all these challenges, and I would love to see how all these things can sort of come together. Maybe Spotify and Apple Music could evolve into something that also contain live segments, or space for conversations like this, or that would be super to see. I guess, yeah.
And yeah, I think we've said a lot, but everything makes so much sense. The similarities and the differences in our countries is amazing. And I'd like to know something. Okay, I've never been to India, right? So Ditty, if I went on a radio station, do you think that the radio stations in your country, do they capture the essence of like the country itself? Do you think that like there's a lot I could take away from just listening to the radio station in India? Would I understand India a bit more from listening to the radio stations there?
Perhaps. I mean, it would be a bit challenging because maybe it wouldn't be in English, and so language would be a bit challenging. But I definitely think you could take away a lot. Especially, you would see how things are sold, how people talk to each other, right? And what's being sold on the radio, and the music, you would hear it. And yeah, I think it would be a nice experience. You must. I think we should all listen to radios from other countries to to figure out what it's like, because it's a world of experiences.
Okay, and I think it not being in English would be cool for me because I've I hear enough English. I speak English. I do a lot of things in English. So I think to come to India and listen, because essence is amazing, and radio. I think radio should do that, like capture essence. Imagine I come to India and like I listen to all the songs I've been listening to here. It's like, oh, okay, um, that wouldn't be as cool for me.
Yeah.
And UMLILO, do you think the radio stations in South Africa capture the essence of South Africa?
I definitely do. Like, I think, I can bash South African radio all I want, but in terms of the culture, like, even if I haven't listened to radio for a while, if I get into a taxi or something, like, I get the vibe of, like, what the kids are listening to, what's happening. And I think we have a good balance between, like, talking about politics and also, playing the music that is kind of culturally relevant. So I definitely think, like, the one thing that we do have is that balance of, like, the localized thing that he was talking about. We've got that, like, each region, there's community radio, which does well in South Africa. The music playlisting, a lot of the time, will kind of give you an essence of what the clubs and, like, what DJs are playing. And, like, so I do think that in terms of that, definitely.
Hana, does radio capture the essence of your
Mostly,
country?
yeah.
Mm.
After the evolution, yes. Like completely everything you listen is what exactly the country looks like.
Okay, that's cool.
Yes, but
Oh,
this is the positive side of the radio.
mhm.
Is people can talk whatever they want to talk about, and there's 100% of freedom uh, in speech. Oh, this is the good side, but the bad side is quality music is neglected. Um, so the 20% or the 10% of the music in radios is like trash. It's exactly what Ditty said. It's very bad topics, very bad manners. So
Just that for us, it's 90%. Yeah.
yep. Okay, so like when you listen, actually, you learn many things about the country and the conditions.
Owen, before I get to you, I just want to ask, Hannah, are the radio stations privately owned or government owned in your country?
Mixture. Uh,
Is it?
Government. We have, I think, one or two government owned, and the others are private.
Okay. Because the reason I'm asking you is because, and UMLILO can attest to this, like in South African radio stations, like you can't, there's no profanity, like it's it's very, hey, mind your tone and mind, the things that you say, because it appeals to the country, because as UMLILO has stated, they're government owned stations. So you can't you can't say what you want in South Africa, because and they will fire you. They fire really quickly. They can tell you, like, you could wake up and get fired from our radio stations.
But
Actually, people can say whatever they want to say, but you will hear lots of conflicts and lots of different perspectives, and people are all the time are being in conflicts and talking very loudly, and so my nerves cannot cannot listen to that anymore. That's really crazy. Even on TV, it's the same thing. All media stations.
UMLILO, did you want to say something?
No, I was just gonna say that it's kind of an interesting balance of like, I mean, I believe that South Africa is very conservative, and as a result, the standards of radio and broadcasting are from a conservative point of view, where even with songs, they'll still bleep out like rap songs and stuff that like use profanities and whatever. But at the same time, there's a lot of accountability in terms of like when you look at like gender and when you look at hate speech and all of that, that standard is still met, which I think that's why people can get fired quickly, because if you are kind of homophobic or misogynist or racist or anything like that is dealt with very quickly, which I respect.
Owen?
I would say you could get the essence of popular culture through our radio. Not so much of what the Philippines is, because we have it's so diverse here. We do have a lot of cultures going on, being an archipelago. So it is hard to get the essence, but you could get the essence of popular culture.
Okay. Wow. And now, my weird question, right? After all the conversations that we've had, the deep dive that we've taken into each other's countries and who we are as people, um, I need everyone to do something for me, and we need to take a bit, like, let's say, I don't know, 20 seconds, and I'd like everyone to imagine a world without radio. And what does that look like for us, for everyone here as individuals, as people, as artists, and our countries? Like, what would that look like for us, a world without it? With the goods and the bads that we've discussed, like, if you had to imagine, what would that look like?
Can May I? Cool.
Yes, please.
I think it will be hard here in the Philippines, since I stated earlier that we are an archipelago. So it's a bit hard to communicate with people from different islands if you do not have radio. Because here there are many radios, a lot of radios, each for in on each island, like the three main regions of the Philippines. So it's a bit hard if you won't have that.
Okay, so there would be a communications barrier,
Yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
so you use radio to communicate with each other more than, like, is it music first or communication first in the Philippines? What would be more important if you had to,
Well,
like,
I'm
weigh them?
I'm 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 speaking of radio as like a way of disseminating information throughout the
Mm,
country. So that would be hard for us if we cannot disseminate information from the capital throughout every region in the country, being a country with 7,000 plus islands. That will be difficult to do.
thank you.
I think I hate to imagine that. I'm not able to imagine it. I'm just not going to imagine a world without the radio. I'm sorry.
And
Yeah,
that's
I
your
agree.
answer.
I agree. It doesn't seem feasible. Like, also losing the sounds of people in their cars listening to radio. I think I would miss that the most, because that's the vibe in South Africa everywhere you go.
I think there will be quiet taxis, quiet cafes, and my family house would be quiet. So basically, that's what you hear. You hear radio in these three places mainly, so they become very quiet.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you could still hear music. Just I think there's a lot of nostalgia attached, to the answers that we'll definitely give because I don't know. I think you could because in a taxi you can still listen to a CD or something, but I think it doesn't capture the essence of our youth actually starting from back then because sorry it was always radio in the houses like I think it's with most people it's like their most cherished memory like growing up and something always playing and people always referred to Sundays. It's like, oh, you wake up and you listen to radio and the different things that that radio is attached to our families, the reason we started writing music, the reason we create music, because of the amount of variation in which it provided. And that's amazing. To an extent that nobody can even imagine a world without radio. And I don't know, is it for everyone here, is it the music? Is it the conversations? Like, what is it that we'd miss the most? Or is it like marrying the two together? Um, what would we miss the most? Is it the music or the conversations for us?
Everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
medium
agree.
itself is special.
Yeah.
Basically, the sound.
Hmm.
True.
Hmm.
The sound. And unfortunately, that's it for Building Radio today. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone loved the stories you gave, the places in which you took each and every one of us for the radio station. We feel like, when I feel like I know you more, using, radio as an element to connect each and every one of us. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is heartwarming.
This has been
Thank you for
awesome.
having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you.